Welcome to Therapy by Choice podcast. My name is Robyne Vance. I am your host for this podcast and an associate marriage and family therapist working with individuals, couples, and families. My therapeutic services are offered through Therapy by Choice, which is a private practice with offices located in San Jose and Palo Alto, California. On this podcast, we offer educational information on a variety of mental health topics. We speak to specialists in the field, and we answer your questions. We focus on helping you navigate life's challenges and offer easy-to-follow practical advice and opinions. Welcome to the Therapy by Choice podcast. My name is Robyne Vance. On today's episode, I will be speaking with Cathy Allen, licensed professional clinical counselor with supervision designation. We will be discussing mental health challenges for people of color, specifically in the Black community, and ways to address stigma and treatment in mental health. Cathy is from Lexington, Kentucky, where she currently practices mental health therapy as an LPCC-S. She works with a wide variety of populations, such as adolescents, addiction, couples, families, domestic violence, and individuals suffering from trauma, mental health concerns, and personality disorders. She also holds a background in education, where she taught both K through 12 and higher education. Cathy has a passion for people, especially those who are hurting with no voice or those who feel forgotten. She finds it both an honor and privilege to be a part of someone's healing process. In her spare time, she enjoys getting massages, manis-pedis, candles, crime shows, long drives, and being in nature. Cathy especially loves spending time with family and friends. Welcome, Cathy, and you are our first official guest for season 2 here on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Robin. Actually, I just love that introduction. I was wondering, who is she talking about? But uh, hey, but yes, thank you for having me, and I'm excited, a little nervous, but excited to be on your show.
Well, I'm always interested in hearing the background story of how people entered their chosen profession. So, what did the journey of becoming a therapist look like for you?
Well, actually, as you said, started out as a teacher. Um, I was substitute teacher in Fayette County, where I reside. And one day I was just in church, and there was I guess, a call to help others in the church congregation. And it was a LAY counseling ministry that we had. And so I started doing that. But as I was doing it and going through the training for it, I really just felt like a calling to become a therapist. And so I talked to one of the ministers there. I believe his name was Alan Connor. And he said, "Hey, you should just go back to school for that." And I did. I ended up going to Liberty University, and I received a master's in marriage and family counseling because I'm passionate about working in pre-marriage counseling, and found that interesting and found that we need to have more counseling in that area. And then later I went back to get a second degree in Master's of Education in Human Service Counseling, which really focused on the human development part
Mhm.
of my degree. So it's kind of like a winding road, but
Yeah.
that's how I came to it.
Wow, that is actually a really amazing story. I really thank you for sharing that with me and with the listeners as well. Definitely something that's pretty encouraging as well.
No.
And yeah, I want to talk, the main thing that we are decided that we wanted to discuss in this episode is, for people in communities of color, particularly in the Black community, it can be challenging or taboo to discuss the topic of mental health. Can you share some of the unique mental health challenges that you've observed or experienced as a person of color?
Well, yeah, so that is a very good topic to discuss. And just a person who has, been on the other side needing any form of, medical assistance or mental health assistance. I think that there's not a lot of providers that are people of color. And I do think that um, there's a big difference in how providers will communicate to people of color because we're all different and we all have
Yeah.
different issues that we may be coming to the provider for. But to just further answer the question, some of the challenges is the accessibility.
Mhm.
As far as insurance, a lot of times there's an insurance barrier, a price barrier, um, in regards to like how can I find let me just say effective healthcare. Some of the healthcare that may be provided for people of color may not be as good, if I can say that, as non-people of color. And the taboo is that I'm in the South. And so the taboo can be that, oh, we don't need it. There's no need for it. It's not a part of our education system to educate us on the importance of taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally. So I see that as one of the bigger issues for a person wanting to receive health care.
Definitely. And how do cultural values and community expectations influence mental health within communities of color?
Well, I think the cultural value and community expectation is that I do see a small shift, but historically, the value as far as mental health and well, and actually physical health is that we don't typically go and take
Yeah.
care of ourselves as we should. And a lot of that was because maybe there wasn't someone who would provide health care. Sometimes back, before I would say my time, more civil rights time, there weren't providers that would want to take you on as a patient because of your color. And so I think what has happened is we've started to believe in this, oh, we'll just take care of ourselves. We can just somewhat suck it up, buttercup type of thing.
Hmm.
Take an aspirin. I know, God rest her soul, my mom, she believed in giving me and my two brothers, baby aspirins for everything. And we were grown. Take a baby aspirin, and I'm like, Mama, that's not going to cure anything. But I also think that in the community, there's a part of not trusting the
Yes.
provider. It's like, well, they historically have not always been uh we've not been done right a lot of times. If we think back on some of the history of experiments that have gone on with people of color. And so I think the community has like this non-trust of providers. And so a lot of that, can be something that should or not should be, it needs to be addressed so that we can bridge that gap.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And, you briefly mentioned like, some of the history in the Black community, just with the medical community. And it makes me think back to COVID. when the COVID vaccine first came out and some of the hesitance in the Black community because of the Tuskegee study and what happened with that, and how even though 50 years later, a long time later, that those types of things still linger in the community. So definitely it would in mental health as well. Just that distrust of the community.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, providers, mental health counselors. I just had a conversation with one of my clients about this. They feel like we're going to push medicine onto them.
Yes. Hmm.
And it's like, well, why do I need to take this? What are you giving me this for? And I know for myself, I typically I push back a little bit on medicine, but my doctor, my provider is very good at, listening to me and helping me listen to my body. But now I do know of a lot of providers that will give their clients medicine just on the first initial visit. Oh, well, let me prescribe Xanaxes and
Hmm.
benzodiazepines are very highly addictive and
Yes.
it happens much younger. I had a family member who was just going through a mental health crisis, and his doctor wanted to prescribe him Xanax. And I'm like, whoa, he's way too young. And I just didn't really appreciate that. So, because it's let's have him do some therapy, some counseling, some other interventions before we just push medication.
Yeah. And in your personal experience, talking about family and different things, and I also have my own experience as well. Have you found it difficult to seek mental health care?
That is a great question because every therapist should have a therapist. And, you know, currently I do not. Now, I do have a sister in law, Shawnee, and she's like, I'm your therapist, I'll be your therapist. But, and she's great. However, I am, I guess, the pot calling all the kettles black because my issue is time. I don't make appropriate time or do well with my time to
Mhm.
put that as a priority. And I do think that's another barrier for people of color. Like we don't prioritize our mental health. But I am currently looking for a really good therapist to just talk to because I think it's just needed. Like I have a lot of friends that I talk to, and however, I want an unbiased opinion about like what's going on in my life. So yeah, I'm right now on the search for a good therapist.
And I think it's important. I was sharing with someone the other day about how, going to therapy does not always equal I'm in crisis.
Hmm.
Sometimes you go to therapy because things are going well. And hey, how do I maintain things? Sometimes it's, hey, I'm looking to resolve something from my past. I know for me, mental health was normalized for me at a very young age. My parents were kind of, I guess you would say, rebels in that sense of, hey, they made us aware as my brother, my sister, and I as children, like, hey, there are these struggles, right? And then they normalize, like, hey, when you have a problem, you can go talk to someone. So for me growing up, within the lens of my own family, mental health was normalized. But outside of my home, there was just a lot of stigma. And so I think that that is what kind of set me up for success in like understanding mental health, making sure like, hey, when you need to access it, it's there. And here's the reason why, here's the value of it. So yeah, there were groundbreaking in that way, which I credit them for. And I know my dad's listening, so he's probably smiling from ear to ear right now.
Oh my gosh. And I love that though. I honestly do because and I'm when you were telling that story, I was thinking, I was like, well, I wonder, because I don't think you were raised in the South at all, were you?
No, no.
Okay.
Born in Buffalo, New York, moved to Southern California in my teen years.
Okay. And so growing up in the Bible Belt, of the region of the country that I'm in, it's like, if you want to go and talk to somebody, you better go talk to Jesus. You do not go outside of this community, this house until, your business. You better go take it to the Lord in prayer. So that's how it was in my household. But I do applaud the way your parents, went at that because that is the platform now that I want to stand on. I want to have, you know, um, mental health be normalized because it
Yes.
should be just
Yes.
as your physical health, your spiritual health, all of those things should just be normal and not looked upon as, oh, you're crazy. And I so appreciate the fact that you stated, like, oh, you don't have to be in a crisis or necessarily suicidal because you want to see a therapist. It could be, how do I get along better with others? Or how do I maintain this, good aura that I'm having? Just whatever it is, like it's open for interpretation. And I
Yes.
really like that. So, and hopefully that's something that we can start to like spread throughout. And I'm hoping that school systems can start doing that because if it's not being done in the home, hopefully the school systems will make mental health a priority or a topic.
Yes, and also with just having completed work with the babies with 0 through 5 for me, I really, highlighted and applauded the parents and caregivers for seeking support for these young children because planting that seed young, again, that as much as we care for other parts of our health, there's this component of mental health. And now we can raise kids who don't see it as a stigma. Hey, when I have a tough time, I go talk to someone. Or, hey, I take that time out of every week to care for myself in that way. And that starts very, very young. So that, that part of the work, I really appreciated working with that community. I know that we talked a little bit about just cultural attitudes, but how do how do you think cultural attitudes towards mental health in communities of color compare to mainstream Western approaches?
Well, as I said, I do think there is a shift. I do see, um, I'm not going to say most of my clients are African American, but I do see more now. So I can say that I believe that there is a shift with us wanting to, when I say us, I mean people of color wanting to take charge of our mental health. But I think the comparison with the mainstream is that even when we see um, mental health ads or commercials, we don't see people of color in those ads or commercials. And so there's still that disconnect of, oh, that's something that I can do as well. I still think it's foreign in that area. And I also think that some of the not disconnect is that there's not a lot of people of color in this profession. So, well, here where I reside, I can't speak nationally. And I wish I did have numbers for that. But I also think too, they don't see that. It's not really a value maybe in their home. So therefore, and we don't see it on social media or hear about it. So really, there's just this disconnect altogether. Now, what I will say, and we haven't, really touched base on this, is that when it comes to substance use counseling, then there's another narrative with that
Yes.
because
Mhm.
it does definitely depict more people of color, whether it's black or Hispanic, in the ads, you may see them going to seek help, or there's that stigma of, black people maybe just being crackheads or alcoholics. which there are a lot of people of color that do suffer from addiction that don't get it taken care of because they think that or most addicts think that they can do it without help. And some have, but not a lot. But I do see that there is a like a disparity, yeah, however you say that
Yeah.
word, with substance use counseling. And I often wonder, is that done purposely, to spin a narrative? So yeah, I do think that the cultural value, um, compared to the mainstream America, it's definitely more accepted. It's more talked about. It's, I think, mostly a part of sometimes their regimen of like, oh yeah, I need to go and talk to my therapist about something. So yeah, it's very normalized.
I definitely agree. Um, we talked a bit about it, but to dive deeper into it, what role does stigma play in discouraging people of color from seeking mental health support?
Well, I'm going to say a part of the stigma is piggybacking off something that you said. Oh, you're just crazy, you're
Mhm.
schizophrenic, you're weak. You're weak-minded if you have to go and have therapy. Um, and what does that say about you? You're not strong enough in the head. That kind of a stigma. What if somebody finds out, that I'm going to talk to somebody? And I think it really, the stigma for this region, I really feel safe in saying it's more of, I don't need to go and talk to somebody. I mean, like, that's silly. I can handle this on my own, and I don't want people talking about me. I'm not crazy, and I'm putting that in air quotes. I can figure this out. I'm stronger than that. So a lot of the stigma to me is placed on weak versus strong. I don't need help in that area.
And I definitely think, cultural beliefs, certainly. I think one of the things that you spoke of that I think isn't really focused on a lot is just the lack of representation, seeing yourself in the providers, seeing that there's enough available providers. I definitely think the fear of judgment is a really big one, being worried about a label.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really do try to do, and this is the psychoeducation piece, is really explaining the purpose of a diagnosis. A lot of times, people use a diagnosis to label a person, but there's very few times where you understand, like, what is the use when we give someone a diagnosis? Is it so that you use it for insurance? Is it so that you know how to treat? And I think when you offer that education to a client of like, hey, this is the value of giving you a diagnosis, and explaining that fully also helps with to take a little bit of that judgment out of it. So that's an education piece that I really like to do. And I think also one of the things sometimes we see is when we see people who have like untreated mental health conditions, it almost is like, I'm sure you probably have this person in your family, like, oh, that's just crazy Uncle such and such. Or like,
Mhm.
oh, that's just how that person has always been. When you see it and you're like,
No.
oh,
Crazy Uncle such and such may be a pedophile. No. Um,
yes.
but no, seriously, to also piggyback off of what you just said, um, I tell all of my clients, I don't treat diagnosis. I
Yes.
treat symptoms. Diagnoses really is mostly, not all the way, but mostly for insurance purposes anyway.
Mm,
So that your session can be paid for. It has to have a diagnosis, just like it does in your physical appointment with your doctor. And I do say that a lot. They have to put in a code for your diabetes in order to give you your medication.
Yes.
But I stress to my clients that I treat symptoms, and I also do talk to them about how, it does go into maybe treating your symptoms. However, a lot of symptoms overlap with different diagnoses. And so I like the educational component that you said that you talk to your clients about. And it's funny because most of my mainstream clients, those are the ones who they love a diagnosis. Like, what am I diagnosed with? What's my diagnosis? Am I bipolar? You know, and my people of color, they really don't even know, like, to even ask that, because twofold, the lack of education with um what a diagnosis is. Like, most people just say, "Oh, I'm just bipolar."
Yeah.
Which, no, just because you're angry doesn't that has nothing to
Or
do.
I have a little OCD, or I'm a
Yes, I'm narcissistic. That one's used all the time, and I'm like, "No, just because you don't like something doesn't mean you're a narcissist or whatever." So they don't really talk to me about a diagnosis, opposed to my mainstream clients who do. And I think that is just more because it's more prevalent in mainstream, that they know what that is because they've been around it before. So yeah, and definitely I'm thinking about my family as I chuckle. Yes, we do have those in our family that are a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but what family does not?
yes.
And but we talk about them as, that's how they are. That's just how they are. And now, because I have been educated, I'm like, oh gosh, if that person could have just went through some counseling, we would be in a different place than we are now in our own family. So yeah, but I do my best to incorporate some of my knowledge in my family, but they think, "Oh my god, here she goes."
Being bougie, being
Yes.
think he knows everything. Yeah.
Oh my god, especially because 'cause I'm certified to teach parenting, and I love trying to talk to them about parenting, and that is a no-go. They're like, "Nuh-uh, mm-mm, we ain't trying to hear all that." So I'm like, "Okay, never mind."
I think it can be tough though, when you're trying to, you know, give people a huge part of my work is how do I break stigma and how do I provide education to people? And a huge part of this podcast, one of the reasons why I wanted to start it is how do we talk about these critical issues in a way that is easy to understand, that removes the clinical language away from it, but that does give people enough information to be able to advocate for themselves when they're going into these mental health spaces. What does it mean to talk about these things with your family members? Does it mean to talk about these things with colleagues and friends and your doctors? So I think that those, a conversation like this has to be had. There are people like you and I that need to push this conversation. And I feel a very heavy responsibility for my community to be an advocate and to be someone who works towards destigmatizing this in our community. But it's a lot of work, and I'm glad that there's others out there just like me doing the work in their various areas.
Oh yeah, like I do think that that's the shift that I'm talking about. I do think that the people of color that do work in my profession, I do feel that we all share a part of that responsibility of normalizing mental health. And one of the things that, when we talk about how do you break the stigma, it's almost like we have to ask the question, to our family members or people out in our community, what causes you to pause and why? Are you pausing because you don't think you can afford it, or you feel like it is unnecessary? Because I want to not just presume or assume that I know the reason why every single person of color is not going to therapy. Generalizing, yes, but I want to know, like, what makes you feel like you can take care or prioritize your mental health. And when I know that, I will feel, much more better prepared, to tackle that, because I want it to be as normal as you going to get a checkup. And I still think that is an issue where African Americans, Hispanics, whoever, do not go to the doctor as much as they are supposed to. So I do, and I am very glad that we have people that can share in that responsibility. I work for a place now currently that there are a lot of people of color that work there in a mental health provider position. And, soon I want to open up my own, private practice and have it be accessible to everybody and including, people of color, and make them feel like this is something that you need to be doing as well.
And I think one of the things when we talk about like misconceptions, um, some of the common misconceptions that I see are um, that, mental health is like a result of like your personal choices in life. And specifically in, communities of color, we have this kind of thing about like, oh, the strong Black woman or the strong Black man, or in Latino communities, you have machismo, like that means like
Mhm.
that kind of like that strong, proud characteristic. Um, what do you think are like some of the key barriers that people face with accessing quality mental health care? Because I think there sometimes can be like a misunderstanding of like, hey, um, I went to a group, or hey, I talked to a therapist. Like, what does that look like with quality mental health care, specifically with the rise of like online platforms, social media, other places where people are looking to get that help?
Well, I think the key word would be the quality, but I also, when you were talking, I was thinking about sometimes when we have that not so good experience, then we
Mhm.
stop going. The first time, well, I didn't vibe with that person, so I'm not going back. I didn't like this medicine, so I just stopped taking it. So a lot of it is sticking with it and being consistent. But speaking of the strong Black woman, the strong, the machismo, that's also a label.
Yes.
And I fall in that label, you know, and if my friends who are listening or who will be listening, I don't mean this as a disrespect to them, because I have really good friends, but oftentimes I don't ever get asked, "How you doing?" It's
Mhm.
they want me, they talk about themselves, because I'm the therapist, and they'll come to me for the advice, but there's really not a reciprocation of that check-in. But I've always been that, oh, the strong one, I can do this on my own. I have to carry, everyone else's weight. Now that is something that I chose, and that's something that I need to work on, hence needing a therapist. But that happens a lot. It's like, oh, I don't really get checked on a lot. There's no check-ins with me.
Yeah.
And I do carry a lot of family weight on me, um, because I'm a fixer and I just want everybody to be happy. And that's also a curse, because there's a lot of pressure and a lot of weight. And I have broke in silence before. So I really like the fact that you said that, as far as like the stronger the person is deemed to be in a family or in a community or friend set, that is definitely the person that needs, the and 2 or 3 years ago, I'm gonna be honest, I've been a therapist since 2015, but it was only 2 or 3 years ago that I actually thought about it in this way. I just took that cross on my back and just started carrying it. But now I understand, like, hey, you can't carry that all the time. You need to prioritize you. And the other part of that, when you were saying effective, um, or quality care, that's a big one because that quality comes in the education that you receive as well, and the passion that the person puts into that education. Always, and I'm just gonna say it, I don't always think that a lot of places in the region that I live in will hire people of color. So that's an issue too. And I don't know if that they are not applying, but I know that I applied for a lot of jobs and a lot of jobs that I would like to work in, and I didn't, get hired. So I don't know if it's that component. If there are some that are qualified, are they actually receiving the opportunity to work? I don't know.
You- Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. And I'm actually interested to hear as kind of like a sidebar, because I this actually came up this week for me. So you know, I believe uh, there are several qualities that you kind of need to get through life's challenges, right? You
Mhm.
need to have strength and you need to have resilience.
Mhm.
Um, I believe that when someone tells you, "Oh, they're just be strong," that's not, it doesn't really mean anything. Um, because strength, I believe, kind of indicates you have an experience in that thing that you need to be strong at.
Mhm.
I think I focus more on resilience because resilience for me represents the biggest lessons, which is the ability, to kind of bounce back from things that happen. What do you think of like strength and resilience? Do you, especially with us, I think there's a because I've also had that label several times. Oh, she's a strong black woman. Um, it- that's not necessarily true. Maybe I show characteristics that look like strength, but I don't know if you are really using that as, hey, Robyne as a person is a very strong and resilient individual, or are you using your thought about, quote, the strong black woman to say that I'm strong?
Oh my gosh. So many things are going on in my head right now. So I typically work with interns, and I take them on um because I want them to have quality, when they are going through school. And so I came across this I don't know if it was like a YouTube or some social media video of a professor talking about resiliency and what that actually means. And the resiliency part is really the process. It's the destination to something. It's not like, so the way it was explained with the resiliency is we tend to, as humans, just think about the end. Like, how do I get there? But the resilience is in the getting there, because there's going to be knockdowns, there's going to be trials, there's going to be all types of things. And how you work through them is what builds that resiliency, that bounce back. It's like, I got knocked down, but I'm going to get right back up and I'm going to try this again. So the strength part, I, it's odd how you defined the strength, like, is it because I have an experience in that area? or just that's just been a tick phrase, oh, the strong black woman. And so when I think of strength, I think it's used as this, oh, they have a lot of wisdom, oh, there's
Mm,
this wisdom.
okay.
Yeah, this wisdom component to, oh, she's a strong black woman, she's wise and, she knows and all of this thing. She can take it on the chin and not get knocked down and all of these things. And it's like, no, not at all. Like my wisdom has nothing to do with my emotional component. Yes, I may be wise, but I still hurt. I still feel pain. I still feel joy. I still need help, just because I'm strong. So I don't know. I just when you said that, it just really struck me. I was like, "Ooh, that's not how I seen it," but I can see how you saw that based on your experience. And with me, I looked at it, the strong. Because I think about my mom. My mom was just so wise, and she just had all of these things, her characteristics, her leadership, her love, her humor, all of those things to me went into her being strong, being brave, um, having a lot of courage to face things. To me is how I see the strong black woman, but no one goes to check on the strong, whether it's a woman or a man. And that's the part that I want to address and keep pushing out there is like, no, they need it the most because you just can't carry all of that alone. You need to either learn how to lighten your load or you need to learn how to say, I need help with this load. So, yeah, I think
Yeah.
we got off topic, but that was just what was in my head.
Well, sometimes that happens. We have a lot to talk about, and I think that one of the things with strength is that I worry about in our community and communities of color is strength as a barrier to accessing care.
Mhm.
Like, oh, you'll get through this, or
You'll
turn
figure
that
it out.
frown upside down, when really, people might really be breaking and could benefit from just someone to talk to, just someone to listen to their story, someone to validate how they're feeling. So that's my concern was like when we talk about like strength and like how we're using those words.
Yeah, because words are powerful, and when you say it like that, it's like most of the time I have had clients say, "Well, I know what the problem is. I just don't know how to fix it." I know how I got here, but then what do I do? It's how do I turn the frown upside down, you know? Um, and I think that part of the stigma is there too. Like I think we suffer in silence a lot. And I do believe the strong may know, hey, I'm breaking or I need help, but how do I ask for that? What does that look like? And what will that say of me? Will people no longer think that I'm strong? Because it is just a catchphrase. That was the word I was looking for. It's such a catchphrase. And so I think it's the being able to be vulnerable with yourself, um, and dropping that label, that persona that I have to be strong. I think that the stigma comes in to play with just honesty. And we know that just from experience, that honesty can be a very challenging thing to face when you're not used to being honest with yourself, not with others per se, but with yourself saying, I need help. What does this look like? What will they think? What do I think? So that story we tell ourselves.
Yeah. And I know that some of the other things that do contribute to mental health disparities, there's some, of course, some social determinants: poverty, education, housing. How do you think, in your opinion, those do contribute to mental health disparities in communities of color?
I think the key word there is accessibility.
Hmm.
Um, in those areas like poverty, education, all of those things, like it's the accessibility of it. Like it's not there. It's not of importance. And I will say, looking at it from that perspective, I think it's a part of a priority. Like, oh, we want to teach them either, well, let me just be honest. I think with poverty, you want to teach them to stay in poverty so that that label is still there. Let me just say that. So we're not going to push education in any way. Thinking back historically, that's the reason why they didn't want slaves to learn how to read, because if they learned how to read, that would mean they would know more. And when you know more, you do more. So there's that component of it. So it's like there is um inequality. So there's not accessibility, affordability for sure. Insurance typically doesn't really pay a lot. Commercial insurance, honestly, I will say that Medicaid pays for more than commercial insurance pays for as far as mental health is concerned. Um, so I do think the lack of education, accessibility, um, quality, um, is it's just not there. It's a part of a gonna say that is that's a part of how I think our system has designed it to keep people of color or people who even fall that are non-color, non-people of color in um that situation. You know, like there's when you look into a neighborhood and it is considered, a neighborhood that's based on income, don't have the same things that a neighborhood in an urban place would have. Like, good um what do you call them? Like grocery stores or hospitals. There's normally a liquor store that's near them, a corner store, but not a neighborhood that's thriving with a library, with, accessibility to parks, anything like that. It's always more of a impoverished area that lacks, the things that other areas don't. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Um, Next, I want to focus on, the work of us. So for you, how do you think we, mental health professionals, can work to destigmatize mental health within these communities that we've discussed today?
So this is the part where, it's gonna sound all kumbaya. So whether or not you are a person of color or non-color and you work in this profession, and I actually said this to my intern this week, you have to really immerse yourself in cultural diversity. If we want to break stigmatism across the board, you have to know what you're working with. You have to really want to be a part of the solution and not the problem. You have to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is um, a situation happened with my intern. And I hope she doesn't mind if I share this, but I'm sharing it. So she's white, and I love her to death. She's great. However, she is now learning what it feels like to be around people that don't look like her and people that look more like me. And there was a conversation with feeling uncomfortable about that. And so what I said to her is, I've always felt that way though. Like there's never, I had to adapt to that because that was the way it was. I'm always typically the only minority somewhere. So you have to become comfortable with the uncomfortable and still shine however you need to shine. So saying that, our profession, we need to know about the people that we're treating. We need to understand their culture. We need to ask questions. Do not assume. Just because I'm African American, please don't think that I love fried chicken or watermelon or sweet tea. I don't like sweet tea. I like unsweet tea. But, don't assume that, based on stereotypes. So I think it's really the multicultural part of it. Ask questions. If you don't know, say it. How can I help you? What do you need from me? How can I make this a better session for you or situation for you? I may not know exactly what you mean when you talk about this, but I want to know. And I think that will help. The one thing that she will say that to me. Well, I want to know, how can I help you? What does it look like? How does that work with you? And I like that. It makes me feel like she's buying in to me as her patient. So that's what I want for all of us to do. If I have to start working with, Native Americans on a reservation, I don't know a lot about Native Americans. And I know what I've been told and what history said, but that could be wrong, as we all know. So I want to make sure that I understand you. And I think that's a big part of the race war that goes on in our country, the division. We don't talk enough. We just point fingers. Where you're white, you must do this. Well, you're Hispanic, you must do that, and so forth and so on. So I think once we try to understand the cultural populations that we deal with and ask questions and do, evidence-based research, that too will help.
Yeah. And the follow-up question for that is bringing a lens for mental health professionals. So how can we encourage more people of color to enter mental health professions? Because we do know that there is a shortage. So how do we encourage people to enter professionals to address the shortage of culturally competent care providers?
That's a $1 million question. I think going back, no, seriously, I don't even know if they still do this in schools, but I think having career day, we used to have like people come in that was a firefighter and talk to you about why you should be a firefighter or why you need to join the army or something like that. I think we have to start early, like having people go into schools and talk about it, having the fairs, like the school fair or whatever. um I see it more so playing out where the people are. So, if we can't start in a school, maybe starting in the doctor's offices and having doctors talk about it, like instead of feeding them some medication, like, saying, hey, maybe you need to go and talk to someone. Now, I will say, to just give a little bit of a shout out, not a little bit, but a big one, here in Kentucky, they are starting to train the police officers to know the difference between if someone is having a psychotic episode because they have mental health, or they're on drugs, so instead of trying to just apprehend them in a way that may not work, they're trying to train them and educate them. So
Uh,
education is definitely key. So I do love that we're
yes.
starting that. Um, so yeah, I think normalizing it, going into the school counselors talking about it, teachers. I mean, of course, I've been a teacher, so there's a lot you need to get done throughout your day, but prioritizing it somehow in social media. Now, getting back to something that you said, though, social media, I think does the quick therapy. Oh,
Mm.
let's just text this, text talk. I'm a little leery on that. Like, you texting somebody now, Chat GPT can be your therapist. Like, okay, what's going on here, people? So I do think pushing the narrative that you need to come in or talk to an actual person on video, not a computer, um, and do it that way. So that's one way I see that it happened or that it could happen. I'm sure there's other ways too that I'm
Yeah.
just not thinking of.
I definitely think for me, one of the things that always is like personally encouraging to me is when I see other people that look like me, because what it tells me is like, hey, this thing is possible.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about how do we work to get others in the field of mental health, other people of color, I think, right now, the large majority of the work would fall on current folks who are in the field, whether it's using our platforms to promote, whether it's entering the schools. Um, Also, sometimes people watch your journey, you know. So sometimes when people see how you handle your own mental health. And then they know, oh, hey, such and such is a therapist, and look how they are able to navigate their mental health. I wonder what that field is like. Or, hey, can you tell me what it means to get my master's degree? Or how do I pick a master's program? How do I pick a practicum site? So it's a lot of it, I think, is our platforms, word of mouth, but some of
Yeah.
it is just people watching us and using us as an example. I think when we're talking about, marginalized, generally mostly marginalized communities, just making sure that the investment is there, making sure that whether it's the school or the college or the workplace, the investment in mental health is there as well. I think it's one of the things that's just really important and key.
Oh, I couldn't agree anymore with you on the investment part. I know that some jobs now are actually pushing like wellness days,
Hmm.
mental health day. And I think that's great, so that because that's saying that you need to incorporate, just days for you to take off. Um, so I agree with that. I also agree with the word of mouth. Um, because everybody likes to talk, like, and say, "Hey, I'm going to see a therapist and she's helping me with this," or she's just somebody or he's just somebody that's, really good to talk to. Um, so I agree. I think that whether it be from school work or community word of mouth standpoint, it's just really getting the message out there that it's okay. One of the things that I would love to see more are men, African American men, coming into the profession and also utilizing mental health. I think there may be, if we're looking at a pendulum, like a slight upswing to that. But most of the time, if African American Black man or Hispanic man is in therapies because it's been mandated by the court due to some form of issue legally or with substance use. But before it even got to that, I would have loved to have seen them just do therapy when those problems were starting. So that is, but that's another a job in and of itself to get more African American men on board with both coming to mental health services and also wanting to be a therapist because I think there's that camaraderie with, Black men seeing another Black man doing that just as much as it is as a Black woman seeing a Black woman doing that. And when you said people are watching, when the first thing that I thought of when you said people were our younger generation, because
Exactly.
that's what's gonna be dropping or not dropping, but breaking the, the what is it called? The thing, the generational, chains and curses is
Yes.
like,
Yes.
the younger generation coming up and saying, "Oh, okay. Yeah, therapy's normalized. Like therapy, we should be doing that." They watch us all the time. When I have interns, it's like having children. It's like, okay, they watch you. Like they do. They're like soaking you up. And I'm like, oh dear God. You know, it's like, let me make sure. And I would have little small talks with them. Now, look, I'm not saying you should have done that because, they looking at me like, oh, do you do this? Do you say that? And I'm like, Lord have mercy. They will expose you if
Mm.
don't have yourself in check. And so, but yeah, I do want to make that something for, and that's why I like having interns because I want them to see the good and the bad and the ugly of what this field is. But I also want them to normalize it because you're here for a reason. And I want the little ones to see that too, to know, oh, Aunt Kathy's a therapist or Miss Kathy's
Yeah.
doing this now. So yeah, I really like that when you said people are watching, and they are. And the right people are watching and making a difference. And to incorporate not just the people of color, but our mainstream white people, like saying, hey, you know, there is a African American therapist that may be good for you. Like if they're talking to a friend and the friend says, "But I want to go see somebody Black or whatever." Like just like all of us need to like make this normal. Like to hey, well, hey, it's okay if you want to go and see a Black therapist. I want to have the conversation. I always want to talk about the elephant in the room. It's just like,
Yes.
okay, do, white people prefer to just stay with white people, or do they care that they're seeing an African American, vice versa? Like I want it to be effective in quality mental health across the board. But everybody is watching. But mainstream America has a better way of getting messages out there than we do because we're marginalized. And so if mainstream America is on board with certain things, then yes, it becomes even more normalized. And so, and I mean that in a good way, not in a propaganda type of way. So yeah, that's kind of how I see that happening.
Totally agree. Um, how can our listeners get in contact with you? And do you have anything interesting or exciting coming up that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, yes, I am on Psychology Today. I do have a profile on there. I also have a business page. It's called Therapy Thoughts. It is on Facebook. Um, I post like some psychoeducational things. I mean, I just started it like maybe 2 months ago, and so I'm trying to I'm trying to make that a bigger platform and grow that. And yes, as far as exciting things, I had told myself I did a vision board for the first time in my life on New Year's Day. And I want to start a podcast myself. I do want to do that. And I have been running from opening up my own private practice. And so I know that that's coming down the pike. I haven't pinpointed like an actual time frame, but I know by next year that's going to be something that I do as well. So, and I also, the reason why I say that is, number one, people have always asked me, why don't you just open up your own? And I talk about that fear, the fear of, am I good enough? How will I do this? How can I do that? But working in the place that I'm working now at Wellness Within, in Lexington, those two ladies that run that facility, they're African American, they have their doctorate degrees. And I say, well, wow, that is an actual role model. When you say people are looking, yeah, I'm looking. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, wow, if they can do that, so can I. And I want to do that now. Like I really do see a need for me to open up my own and have my own motto and narrative that I want to spin on my own practice. Also, a friend of mine, Jason, he and I have always thought about opening up an independent living program for
Yeah.
kids who have aged out of foster care.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes they don't have, anywhere to go and they still need more guidance and supervision. And so they can go into independent living from 18 to I think they've raised it to 24. Um, Definitely that's a passion of mine. I love working with young adults. And
That's
so
amazing.
yeah, so there's a lot of things that I'm looking to get into um just because I think I've ran from it long enough. So it's caught up to me. It's like, okay, girl, it's either you gonna, as my dad would say, poop or get off the pot, but he would say the other word. Uh, so yeah, it's time for me to get off the pot.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I definitely I enjoy following your Facebook page, Therapy Thoughts. And the other day, it must have been someday this week, you had posted something about like things to tell yourself before bed tonight. And
Yeah.
I stopped and I had looked at that, and one of those little things was like, must have been what I needed to hear for the day. So definitely for our listeners, please definitely make sure you follow that Therapy Thoughts page on Facebook. All right. And lastly, I really want to thank you, Cathy, so much for just taking time out of your busy schedule and just educating my listeners. But before you go, would you mind participating in a quick little game I call Robin's Random Reflections?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm really
Right.
nervous.
Well, I'm a pretty deep thinker.
Yes, you
Occasionally,
are.
yeah, I have random musings, reflections, and I'm always interested in how others might answer these questions. So I'm gonna have you pick a number between 1 and 5.
5.
All right. If you could have an unlimited supply of one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
No, just one thing?
Mm-hmm.
That is so unfair. Mm, I hear my friends saying candles, candles. An unlimited supply of oh, Robin, this is just not okay. There's so many. Okay, so fine. I'm gonna say money. Yeah, money. So I can buy all the candles and give it away or, spend it. Yeah, I guess money. I'm so upset now. But anyway, it's okay. It's okay. I'm resilient. We bounce back.
Right. Well, I again want to thank my guest, Cathy Allen, and thank you, the listener, for joining me for this episode of the Therapy by Choice podcast. Don't forget to like and share this podcast, and feel free to follow us on social media. I'll also be posting Cathy's contact information within the episode details. If you do have a specific question or you would like to request a topic to be covered, you can text me at 408-786-9651 or email me at robyn@therapybychoice.com. That's Robyne, ROBYNE, at therapybychoice.com. Also, visit our website at www.therapybychoice.com. My name is Robyne Vance. Take good care. While we hope to provide insight and education, our podcast does not replace therapy, and listening to our podcast does not establish a therapeutic relationship. If you or someone you know are in crisis, please call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988.